Hey guys, it's Luke Yon, and today I am going to be doing my June wrap-up. I read like 12 books in June, 14, I honestly can't remember, but I read quite a few, so yeah, let's just get into it. I don't really have much else to say, so let's just start talking about the books. So the first book that I read in June was actually a reread, and that was An Emotion of Great Delight by Tahereh and Mafi. I read this book back in February because I got an e-arc of it, and I really enjoyed it, but I did say that I wanted to reread it once the physical book was out because I feel like I had just, I wasn't able to fully, appreciate the story for what it was, but when I went into rereading it, I kind of knew what the story was, and so I came out liking it a lot more, and so I think I originally gave it a 4.5, but I definitely give it a 5 out of 5 at this point. I think this is honestly one of the most beautifully written books I've ever read. I think that Tahereh Mafi just friggin' slam dunked us all. She really brought her game with this book. She's always had really good writing, but I think it was just especially good in this book. And I really loved the kind of character journey that we went on with the main character, Shadi. This book takes place in December of 2003, after the US has declared war on Iraq, and we follow a young Muslim teenager who wears a hijab, and her life is kind of falling apart. Her dad is in the hospital, her brother died the year before, her mother is grieving for her son and is kind of just falling apart. Her sister isn't really speaking to her anymore, and her best friend, Zara, also is not speaking to her anymore. And so she kind of has just, the world stacked against her, and it's kind of just her journey breaking through the surface of her sadness, and I loved it so much. I thought that this was just so beautiful, not just in the writing, but also in the way that it explored Shadi as a character. She really felt like a real person. I also really enjoyed how her being Muslim impacts her daily life, and I thought it was really well done, and it didn't feel preachy or anything. It just felt like a very natural part of the story, and I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed this book, and I would definitely recommend it if you have not picked it up yet. I would say I probably like A Very Large Expanse of Sea more, just personally, but I do think this is really good, and on an objective standpoint, I think they're pretty on par. Then I read The Worst Best Man by Mia Sosa. This is a romance book, and I kind of just read this for a palate cleanser. It follows a woman named Nina, and the book starts out at her wedding, and basically she finds out that the brother of the groom accidentally, drunkenly convinced him not to marry her, and he kind of breaks the news to her, and the book takes place a couple of, months or a little while after that, and they basically end up having to work together, and, it's a romance book. They fall in love. So this was a pretty generic romance book. I thought it was fun and quick to read. I was kind of in a reading slump when I was reading this, and it definitely brought me out of that because it was just very quick and easy to read, and I could kind of just shut my brain off while I got through it, and there was nothing inherently wrong with it, but I thought it was just okay. I thought the characters were interesting, they were fun to follow, and the plot was engaging. It was kind of slow at times for a romance book, but for the most part it was pretty fast-paced. And I didn't like the romance at the heart of it, and I thought it was fun, and I also liked how the main character is Brazilian, and I liked how her culture was kind of infused into the book, and I did enjoy it, and I liked the author's writing. I thought it was good, and I did like the dual POV. But again, it's a pretty generic romance book. I haven't thought about it a ton since I read it, but I wouldn't steer you away from reading it. Then I reread 2 books. I read The Beautiful and the Damned by Renée Ahdieh. I do own both of these books, but they are on my other shelves, and I'm just not in the mood to go get them, so you'll just have to deal with the pictures. But I talked about this series before. It's a historical fiction book series, about vampires and everything. I really enjoy it. The first book follows a woman named Celine who comes to New Orleans after fleeing Paris, and for reasons that you find out, and she ends up coming into New Orleans while these murders are happening, and there are symbols sketched in their blood next to the victims, and she basically has to figure out who the murderer is and what the hell is going down. And I really enjoy this series. I gave The Beautiful, I kept my rating at 4 stars, and then The Damned I gave 3 stars. I liked The Damned, but it's not I think it was definitely not as good as The Beautiful. It's very, very different. So if you like loved The Beautiful, you might not love The Damned because they are very different books, but I still enjoyed The Damned, just a little bit less than The Beautiful. And I am excited for the third book, which is coming out in November, but you know, I've already talked about these books, so we're going to move on. But after that, I read Two Dark Reigns by Kendare Blake. This is the third book in the Three Dark Crowns series. But the first book, Three Dark Crowns, follows these three sisters, Mirabella, Arsinoe, and Katarine. And on the day of their 16th birthday, they kind of have to fight to the death to find out who will be, like, the true queen, or, like, the queen of this island that they live on called Fennbirn. And this book basically continues that journey. I can't really talk about it because it's the third book in the series, but I really enjoyed this book. I like how it expanded on the previous two books, and I don't know which book in the series is my favorite. I think this and One Dark Throne are kind of tied. They're very quick fantasy books, so if you're not like a huge fantasy person, I think this is a great series to start with because it's not too big on the high fantasy, and it's definitely very accessible for kind of like non-fantasy readers. And I really enjoyed it. I like how character-driven this book was, because I feel like nailing the third book in a quartet is very hard to do, but I think Kendare Blake executed it really well, and I liked how this was more focused on the characters' journeys and their, like, personal arcs, and I think that it was fun to follow them. My favorite character, my favorite, like, sister, is definitely Mirabella. I do like Arsinoe and Katarine more, but I think that Mirabella is just the most interesting, and I feel like she gets the least page time, which is really annoying. I think Arsinoe gets the most page time, and I just am not the biggest fan of her. Also, Jules is becoming more of a main character in this series, and I just do not care for Jules. I don't know why. I just don't find her very interesting. But, you know, for the most part, I did really enjoy this book, and I do really enjoy this series. So I gave this book like a 4 out of 5 stars, somewhere around there. After that, I read The Queens of Fenerburn by Kendare Blake. This is like a bind-up of 2 novellas. One is called The Oracle Queen, which is about an oracle queen in the series, and it's like about why every queen that is born an oracle queen is immediately drowned, so it's kind of like the prequel backstory on that. And then the next novella is called The Young Queens, which is about Mirabella, Arsinoe, and Katarine in their younger years. And I enjoyed the Oracle Queen more than the Young Queens. I still enjoyed both of them, and I gave the book like a 3 out of 5 stars. It was fine. They're like novellas. I don't know how to talk about novellas, so we're just gonna move on. Then I read one of my most anticipated books of the year, which was The Box in the Woods by Maureen Johnson. This is the 4th book in the Truly Devious series. Basically, the Truly Devious trilogy was about Stevie Bell, who goes to this academy where there's like murders and stuff. This book does not follow that same mystery. It follows Stevie Bell and like all her friends still, but it is a new mystery. And in this book, Stevie Bell is kind of like, she has just solved the Truly Devious case, and she's kind of winding down. It's the summertime, and she gets an email from this guy who is like, hey, I am the new owner of this camp, and like in the 70s there was this really horrible murder. Would you want to come and pretend to be a camp counselor, or be a camp counselor, and make this podcast with me about the murders? You can bring your friends along and everything. And so Stevie accepts, but when she gets there, a new tragedy strikes, and she kind of has to once again deal with a murderer in the past and a murderer in the present, and see what's going on. So I really, really enjoyed this book. I don't think I enjoyed it as much as the Truly Devious trilogy. I might have to reread it like a little while from now. But I ended up giving it like a 4.75 out of 5 stars. And I do think that the mystery, like, there's no way that you would be able to solve this mystery without a crucial piece of information, which is revealed later on. So that was a little bit cheap to me. But other than that, I still really enjoyed it. I loved being back with the characters, and I think Maureen Johnson, the way that she crafts mysteries and all of the clues is very interesting. It's just that the end result of this one, while interesting and like a cool way to like wrap things up, felt a little bit like, oh, like it was kind of like you couldn't really solve it unless you had this piece of information, which is revealed like in the last chapter. So overall, I still really enjoyed it, but like I feel like it could have been a little bit better. There could have been a little more foreshadowing and like stuff, but you know, I still really liked it. I gave it like a 4.75 out of 5 stars, so I would definitely recommend it if you liked the Truly Devious series. You can also pick this up if you haven't read those books, but I recommend reading those books because I really love them. So you can't really go wrong. Then I reread yet another book. I reread Antidarken by Kiersten. This is the first book in the Conqueror's saga. So I read this book back in 2017, and this book is a gender-bent Vlad the Impaler, so it's about Vlad the Impaler if he had been born a woman, and this follows Lada and her brother Radu when they are sent away from their home in Wallachia to the Ottoman courts as political prisoners by their father, who sucks. And yeah, this kind of just follows their journey. So I really, really love this series. In July, I read the last 2 books in this series, which I had never read before. So I'll talk about that in my July wrap-up. But I really, really loved rereading this first book. I think I liked it even more the second time around. I think I just had a new appreciation for the story. And I know a lot of people say this book is really slow, and while I do agree that it is very slow-paced, I liked it because it's like a really cool build-up. And like the book starts when Lada and Radu are born, and it kind of goes through the years slowly. Most of this book does take place in the Ottoman courts, and it takes place mostly in their teen years, but you do get to see like their early childhood, and then their kind of like when they're like 7, 8, 9, things like that. And I really enjoyed that aspect of the story, because I feel like that's something that you don't often get in YA, and I think it just adds a lot to the character development, and I think that is this series' strongest asset, is the characters, because they just shine so much. I know they were real people, but they truly do feel like real people. You would be surprised how many historical figures are in books that feel not like real people. But Kiersten White definitely achieved that, and I cannot imagine the amount of research that she went through to write this book and these books, this series. And I just have so much respect for this series, and I really love it. I love the plot, I love the characters, I love the writing. There are things that like I think could be a little bit better. This book did, while I said I like the slow pacing, sometimes it did get a little bit slow, and there could have been things that were cut out just to like add more tension and like keep the pacing and the plot more active and present. But other than those like minor things, I still really enjoyed this, and I gave it like a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I don't know, but I don't really know what I was gonna say, so we're gonna move on. But after Antidarken, I read a super chill book, you know, no stakes at all. I read A Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. This is the first book in the Song of Ice and Fire series. I'm not gonna explain what this book is about, 1, because it's way too complicated, and 2, because I'm sure you all kind of know what this series is about. So I actually surprisingly really enjoyed this book. I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. Again, I did think it was a little bit long and really dense and kind of slow at times, but for the most part, I did really enjoy my time reading it. I, again, think the characters are one of the strongest assets of this book. I really liked most of them. Some of them I was not the biggest fan of, but I did like following most of them, and I liked the world, and I did really like George R. R. Martin's writing. I was scared that it was going to be like very boring, but it was actually really engaging, and I liked how kind of descriptive it was, and it was very, very immersive. And I actually read this book in like 3 days or something, so it was surprisingly really quick to get through. And I did really enjoy it, and it was very addicting despite the pretty slow pacing. And like even despite those things, I still had a fun time reading it, and I am excited to continue on with the series. When that happens, I don't know, because these books are so long. This is almost 700 pages, and it is the shortest book in the series, so send help. But I did really like this book, which I feel like I've said 1,000 times, and, you know, like, I do have my minor complaints, but for the most part, I was really pleasantly surprised with this reading experience. After that, I read Escaping from Houdini by Kerri Maniscalco. This is the 3rd book in the Stalking Jack the Ripper series. And I enjoyed this book. I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5 stars. This is basically set on an ocean liner, and it was fine. I liked it, I guess. I thought it would be a lot better than it was. I feel like this book was so slow, and there were some parts that were so boring, because there are multiple murders that happen in this book that kind of like follow a pattern, but that pattern was like there was no kind of like diversification of how the murders happen or why they happened or the clues or anything. It just felt like the same old, and I thought it was fine, but, like, there's nothing really that stands out to me about this book. And it was just very slow, and I don't really understand why, because I feel like it could have been really fast-paced and interesting, because, like, you're on a ship. You can't leave, like, unless you want to friggin' Titanic-style float on a door in the middle of the ocean. You can't really leave. You're stuck there. You're on a ship, and you can't do anything but stay there and wait until you dock. And I feel like that adds so much tension to books. And it would have added a lot of tension to this book if Kerri Maniscalco kind of developed that more and made it a little bit more interesting. And I think that the murderer was really cheap. They are a real person, but I think that it was just like... Kerri Maniscalco, I think, took too many artistic liberties with this book, because I read the author's note, and it was just like, I don't really get it. Like, I feel like this book honestly didn't even need to happen. I feel like you could have just gone from book 2 into book 4. I don't even know if I'm going to read the final book in this series, because so far, they've just been kind of mediocre, and sadly this book did not change that. Next, I read The Vacationers by Emma Straub. This is a book about this family who takes a trip to Mallorca, Spain, and they all kind of have their own issues going on, and they go on this trip for 14 days, I believe it was, and it kind of just goes through each day. And I thought this was okay. I also give it 3 out of 5 stars. It felt pretty boring. Like, I feel like there was other stuff. Like, I feel like nothing was happening. And I like vacation books. Like, The Unhoneymooners is one of my favorite books of all time. And with that book, each day felt exciting and really cool, and I felt super envious about what was happening. But this book, I was like, okay, and, like, what else? I feel like there was nothing keeping my attention, and I kind of had to force myself to read this book. It's not like I hate this book. I don't hate this book. It was fine. It was kind of like I was able to turn off my brain while I read it and kind of get absorbed in other people's problems, but, you know, like, for the most part, it was kind of just alright. Like, I feel like that's the best word to describe it. It was alright. It was fine. Nothing really special. I wouldn't really steer you away from reading it, but I think there's other books that you could read in place of this that kind of have like a similar plot/theme, so. Then after that, I kind of went back to fantasy, and I read Witchshadow by Susan Dennard. This is the 4th, technically 5th book in the Witchland series, which is a series that I really enjoy. I liked the first 2 books a lot. Sight Witch I thought was okay, and I did like Blood Witch, but I felt like I didn't love it as much as the first 2 books. And this book I kind of felt similarly. I ended up giving it like a 3.5, 3.75 out of 5 stars. I don't know why, but with this book especially, it felt like there was like a missing part. Like, I felt like there almost could have been a novella between Blood Witch and this book, because it just felt like there was something missing, and I can't really, like, I do know why. And, like, I even read a recap of Blood Witch and, like, watched reviews and everything to, like, make sure that I hadn't forgotten stuff, and I have forgotten stuff. But even once I had, like, kind of reacquainted myself with what happened and, like, remembered some things, this kind of just, it felt like there was something missing. It felt like there had almost been, like, 100 pages before this book, because the book starts out and I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like, this is not, like, I felt like nothing had been, like, it felt like there was almost, like, I had missed a book in the series. It was so weird. And I know why. It's because Susan Dennard said that she originally wanted 2 books for Assault, but for reasons she had to condense it into 1. And so she wrote this book as though it were the second book of the 2 that she planned for Assault, and then she kind of just threaded what she planned in the first book of Assault in flashbacks throughout this book. I personally think that she should have written both books and then just shortened them and had this be book 2, like, had it been the story that it was, but taken book 1 and threaded it better, because I think, and also the flashbacks stop, like, at part 2, which is, like, around halfway through the book, and I felt like even the flashbacks that were in part 1 were so vague and short that they didn't give me the information that I was really craving to understand this book fully. And I think, like, originally when I finished this book, I gave it 4 stars, but I think I'd probably lower it, like, as I said, to a 3.5 or 3.75, because there was just, like, I felt like this was... I don't know, I can't even really explain it, and I don't think that rereading Blood Witch would have, like, improved my reading experience very much, but I do think that before the final book comes out, I do want to, like, start over with the series and read it all the way through, because I feel like I might enjoy it a little bit better if I do that, but, like, this was kind of just okay. I was really excited for it, and it was, like, it was an okay addition and installment to the series, but I feel like, again, like, I felt like I was forgetting something, and there was really no way for me to assuage that feeling. So, that was kind of annoying, but I still enjoyed this book, and I would probably recommend waiting until the final book is out and then reading all of them, or going back and reading the books, like, start to now. Like, if you haven't read Blood Witch in, like, a year or something, or 2 years since it came out, I recommend going back from Truth Witch and, like, reading all the way up to this point. If that makes any sense? I don't know, but whatever. After that, I read Realmbreaker by Victoria Aveyard. This is the first book in a new high fantasy series that takes place in this world where there were originally these portals called spindles, but they have all kind of died out. And there is this person that is trying to reopen all the spindles using this thing called the spindle blade. And our main character, Kerri, kind of teams up with these other people in this world to find the spindles and find the person that is trying to open them, because he basically wants to open them so that the creatures from these other realms can seep into the current realm, which is called Aveyard, and kind of like so that he can rule. And our main characters are obviously trying to stop that, because a few years ago, the people that were kind of like the heroes failed in stopping the big bad, and so now our characters kind of have to step into that role and do it, and, you know, fix everything. So I surprisingly really enjoyed this book. I had read the first 2 books in the Red Queen series by Victoria Aveyard, and I thought they were just, like, okay. Like, I didn't really understand the hype around all of them. And so I was kind of weary going into this book, but I actually really enjoyed it. It felt like very classic fantasy, and I really liked that aspect of it. Like, it felt like, I don't know, it felt very classic fantasy. It didn't really, it was like, I loved the high fantasy aspect of it, because I feel like I haven't read a lot of really good high fantasy recently, and I liked how immersive the world was. You can definitely tell that Victoria Aveyard did her due diligence in building up Aveyard and the other realms, and I really liked when we would kind of see glimpses of the other realms, and I also think this book was really well written. I liked Victoria Aveyard's writing, and I liked how she kind of was able to differentiate between the different POVs in this book, and I really liked that. My one complaint, or like probably my main complaint, is that this book is told in third person, but like every single page there is an interjection in first person. So you know when you're reading a book in third person, and then there's like an italicized section in the character's head, like in their thoughts? That happened in this book, like, literally every single page. Like, if not every single page, there were pages where it happened, like, 2 or 3 times. And it was just really bothersome, and I don't know why it bothered me so much, but it was kind of annoying. For the most part, I did really enjoy this book, and I'm super excited for the sequel, because the way things ended in this book were friggin' rough. So, I'm definitely looking forward to book 2, and yeah. And then the final book that I read in June was How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories by Holly Black. This is a novella that is set after the Cruel Prince trilogy. I thought this book was okay. I gave it 3 stars. I thought it was honestly, like, really boring, and I don't understand why this was written, really. There were parts that I liked. There were some stories that I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. But for the most part, I was like, this is so boring. I don't know why this was needed. I'm a big stickler for, like, not adding books onto series unless they are a story that needed to be told. This did not feel like a story that needed to be told, and I don't think we really needed this. And also, this woman, this lady, I can't remember her name, but it was something with an A, and I can't remember it, and it's kind of bothering me now, but whatever. She kept popping up and telling this story, and the story was so annoying and so boring, and she told it like 3 separate times, and I was like, ma'am, and it was different every single time, but it was still just like not an interesting story to listened to 4 times. So that was kind of a minor complaint. But I gave this 3 stars. I don't dislike it enough to give it 2 stars. Maybe it's like a 2.75, but like, it was fine. I'm probably never going to think about it again. And, you know, maybe it'll be worth something someday, so I'm not going to get rid of it. And I did get it for my birthday, so I had that attachment to it. And it is kind of pretty. I mean, I really like the end papers and everything, and the art in here is really cool too, so. You know, as long, you know, even if it wasn't a great book, I still get pretty pictures. So, you know, that's a win for me, I guess. But that is it to this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'd love to know what books you guys read in June, and yeah. All my social media links are in the description box below. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I have very exciting videos coming next week. So, I'm excited to tell you about those. But, yeah. That is it for this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!